Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Abigail if you're new, and I make videos about health issues, special needs, and feeding tubes. So today, just a second, let me turn my TV off real quick because it was about to play like an instrumental song. Okay, so today was busy in some ways, not so busy in other ways. Like, I stayed home today, but we did get my window unit in the window today because it's really hot here where we live, even though it's March and it was getting way too hot. I do have a fan that I use for my room, but even with my fan in here, it was very uncomfortable to be in my room because it was just so hot. So we put the window unit in today. So that took a while to do. And then my supplies for my feeding tube came in. So basically I have a supply box that's like my extensions, tape, what else? Tubey pads that's disposable, and I think that's about it that comes in that box. And then I have several boxes of just formula. Well, sometimes my supplies and my formula come in two different shipments, so my supplies came today but not my formula yet, but it's okay because I have backup. I still have enough. But whenever I get my supplies in for the month, there's a checklist that comes with my stuff, and it shows us what I'm supposed to get and what I did receive in that box, and then if there's any other boxes coming other than my formula. This is the extension that I normally get. Looks like this. And today I realized that I got a different extension than one I normally get. So this is the one that I got today. And then this is the top of that one. Way different. So, not a big deal. I do get 4 extensions every month. So instead of getting 4 like this, like I normally get, I got 4 that looks like this. And so we were like, you know what? It's okay. I do have backup extensions. So it was fine. But we decided that before we called the company to let them know that they sent the wrong ones, we were going to test it out. So if you don't know, I have a J-tube, which is where I get my feedings. My J-tube goes to my intestines because my stomach doesn't work right. And then my G-tube that goes to my stomach, I have it for venting, also known as like getting sick out of. And so we were like, you know what? Why don't we hook this new extension up to my G-tube button, because I had like recently had some candy, and we were like, why don't we hook it up to my G-tube button and see if it will actually work, because if this works with my button, we won't have to call the company and tell them to send different extensions. So that was the plan. Before I continue with the story, I want to say it is kind of gross, but it did end up kind of funny. So I had this bag it was like this clear bag that this extension came in. And I was sitting on my bed, and the plan was to hook up the extension to my button to see if anything comes out of my stomach, and if it does, then we would know that this works with it. So anyways, I'm sitting there, with hooking up this, and all of a sudden it like gushes out like crazy. And thankfully the bag that this comes in was under it because it caught it. And so that was rather interesting. If you don't know what venting is kind of the same thing as getting sick, but instead of by mouth, it's by tube. It's by my extension. So to explain this, a lot of people are confused. Most people have what's called a G-tube, which goes to their stomach. A lot of times when you hear of somebody getting a feeding tube, it's a lot of times a G-tube. That's the most common. But they do make what's called a J-tube, which is what I have, that goes to my intestines. This is for some reason, like if your stomach doesn't work right, or, something like that. In my case, I have a hernia, and my stomach is also partially paralyzed from a previous surgery. So what they did when they placed my feeding tube is they gave me a G-tube to my stomach to vent out if I want like candy or something like that. And then the J-tube goes to my intestines, and that's where I get my feedings from. So about once a day, usually, every once in a while I'll skip, but usually about once a day, I will vent out of one of these extensions. Usually like over the toilet or something like that. But anyways, people also ask me, why can I have like candy and I can't have, let's just say, food items? So my formula is basically my nutrition. Some people, when they're on feeding tubes, they have things that they like mix in. I'm not sure what all they're called, but some people that's on a feeding tube can also have things by mouth. Me personally, I can't because my stomach is partially paralyzed and some of it is herniated. And back when I used to eat by mouth before my feeding tube, I would get sick like 30 minutes to an hour after eating every single meal. So I lost a lot of weight, and that's why I got put on a feeding tube. So the reason why I can have things like certain kinds of candy or ice cream and I can't have just any kind of food is because what I have has to be able to go through this tiny extension. And if I were to have just, I guess, what you would call normal food, it would not be able to fit through the extension, and therefore, if it wasn't able to go through the extension, I could get sick by mouth. So the extension is basically for me to have enough by mouth to where I'm satisfied. Like I can have a piece of candy or a little bit of ice cream or something like that. Basically, the easiest way to explain it is that the things that I can have by mouth mostly melt. So that's the easiest way to explain it. So yeah, I can have ice cream, certain kinds. For some reason, Nutella goes okay. Peanut butter. What else? Certain kinds of candy, mostly candies that melt, like chocolate, things like that. Some hard candies that melt, I can have that. But anyways, it's interesting, but it's also like confusing to people. I still get asked like all the time, like in person, if somebody has like candy or something, they'll be like, "Can you eat this?" because people get really confused about it. But this is basically a way that I can have a handful of things by mouth, still technically, even though I get sick out of my tube. That way I'm still able to keep my weight because my feeds go to my intestines instead of my stomach. So this right here is my pump. I'm on the Infinity pump. And then my bag full of formula. So I am what you would consider like completely tube fed. Because the things that I have by mouth are very, very limited and not very many calories. So yeah, I'm considered completely tube fed. I deal with my tube completely on my own. Besides, my mom does come in my room early in the morning to flush my tube for me, just where you put water through the tube so that it doesn't clog, because it can after a while. In the mornings, I flush my tube every 4 hours, and then at bedtime, I flush it right before I go to bed, and then my mom flushes it early in the morning, and then I flush it right when I get up, and then every 4 hours, like, until I go to bed. So it is a full-time job to have a feeding tube, because I mean, there's flushing it, there's making sure your pump is working right. Like, it could get kinked. It can have air in the tube. Basically, air is whenever there's like space in between the bag, and there's like air in the bag, and the formula doesn't want to go all the way through, and then it'll like beep on you, and you have to like push the prime button for the formula to continue to go. And my Pacific pump, it doesn't flush itself. There are some pumps that does the whole, like, flushing thing that I do every 4 hours. Some pumps flush your tube automatically, but mine doesn't. I have to do it by hand. So if you would like to know more about like how a feeding tube works, questions about it, you can ask me down in the comments down below, and I can do like a separate video on all that, because it's really confusing to a lot of people. But I will say, between having the feeding tube and eating by mouth, I would rather have the feeding tube, because this keeps me full and I get all the calories that I need from my formula, and I'm able to keep it down, which is great. So if you have any questions about that, let me know. Or if you would like me to do a certain Q&A soon, let me know so y'all can ask me questions. But anyways, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye, everyone.